Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to another episode of Doing the Thing with your host, Scotty B. Today on our show is a guy who goes by Steven in his regular life. But back in the day when we met at Pally, he went by Snacks. He was one of the people who had so much energy that he probably could have ran the entire thing on his own without any other instructors. At least that's how the rest of us felt when we were exhausted, and he was still just at the top of his game. So welcome, Snacks.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm happy to be here.
So how did you get into the industry?
So I've been in the outdoor recreation industry since 2006 in a working capacity. That was more summer camp style, but I got into the outdoor education industry a few years after that. Around 2010 was my first official outdoor education job, working with just school groups, not just the residential day camp experience. So I've been a part of the industry for a long time. I have somewhat stepped away from the outdoor education side of things and have now stepped back more into the outdoor recreation form. I'm a family events director for a country club, so I run their summer camp programs, their youth offerings, as well as family entertainment year round. So I still am very much part of the camp industry, invested in getting kids outside and teaching them about stewardship of the environment and how to push their boundaries in a collaborative and community-based setting. So yeah, about 2010, I think was my first official season, though, as an outdoor educator. And I got started because I also was a camper. I've been a lifelong sent to camp type of kid. I definitely was not one of the kids that saw a camp going, oh, mom, dad, send me there. It was a bit of I genuinely thought we were going on a tour my first time I went to a camp. We were just walking around and I thought we were just seeing it for next year. And then my mom was like, do you think it's cool? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool here. She's like, good, because you're staying for 2 weeks. Which for anyone who's thinking how to introduce kids to residential camp experiences, surprising them that they're not going home is not the way to do it. Just get them excited for it, do the tour beforehand. But that was an interesting step into it. So I hated my first summer camp. I thought it was a miserable experience, except I thought the counselors were really cool. The kids were okay, but I was also, crying all the time because I was kind of homesick. But it was after the fact that it dawned on me oh, I did get to do these things that I enjoy. I asked to go back the next year. So in the moment, it was not my favorite. And afterwards, I look back with fondness, and even to this day, look back as a big growing experience for me. And that kind of encapsulates what I think a lot of people go through in terms of whether it's as a camper or even as a new professional or budding professional in an outdoor rec world. You sometimes get into it and it's not exactly what you were expecting. It's a lot more exhausting or asks a lot more of you than you think. And it's not until you've had time to reflect and process that you realize where you were growing or what that experience was meaning to you in that moment. And I think it's kind of neat. That is something that isn't just for the campers. It also impacts the adults or the young adults who enter that field, either for a lifetime career or even just for a first time experimenting with a new holistic style of work.
So what was it that your mom thought that this was going to be a good thing, that she just signed you up without even knowing?
Well, there was stuff going on at home that, as a kid, wasn't fully in the know about, but it was good for me to be out of the house for a little bit. It's about as far as I can dig into that at the moment without, my mom hearing this podcast and being like, I can't believe you put me on blast on this podcast. There was good intent, and memories fades as a kid. I was 6 years old. My mom lied to say I was 7. So that's the other thing is I actually shouldn't have been at this camp. So either way, so she may have mentioned it to me, and as a kid I'm just like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. What is camp? Cool. And it was, we were in an area where a lot of our extended family was, so it wasn't weird to be traveling into those neck of the woods. And I actually had heard about this camp because my mom was a camper there years ago, so it wasn't like I had never heard of the place. But I definitely didn't, in my mind, in my memory, I don't remember agreeing or being told you're going to this camp, this is a thing. I genuinely thought oh, just checking the place out for now. But kids are dumb because they're kids. They're allowed to be. So I may have just been really dumb and not realize that this was supposed to happen.
That is amazing that your mom just was like, you need to go do this.
Yep.
But you also had the familiarity, and it wasn't just like a brand new experience either, as far as like it was like running in the family.
Yeah, and I had also like done the sleepovers and stuff like that. So my mom had done all the things that this is the camp director brain of me talking of when we always tell parents like how to get your kid prepped for resident camp. She did everything except like really make sure I understood that I was going to camp.
Minor detail.
Yeah.
At what point did you ask to go back, or was it like a, hey, do you want to go back, and then you were said yes?
Yeah, it wasn't like I got picked up and I'm like, sign me up for the next one. It was, a few months later when you start planning your summers out that my mom asked me and my younger brother at that time, like, hey, do you want to go back to this camp? And we actually went to 2 camps that next summer. So clearly the traumatic moment had passed and I did want to go back. I wanted to see the friends I had met. I wanted to see the counselors I had met with. And there's so many like, you don't get to do it all in one summer. So I'm like, oh, I want to go back. And this time I want to sign up for sailing, or I want to sign up for archery this time. So like there were things for me to look forward to get excited about. And me being excited, I think also got my brother who was going to do his first year excited. And I think my mom really wanted to make sure that we went as a pair, considering how rough and dramatic my postcards home were. So it was me. It wasn't just a you're going back surprise. And it really became just a part of our summer traditions is we went to summer camp. And I was the only person in like my friend group, because at this point we moved around a lot as kids. I lived in around Philly when I first went to camp in like upstate New York. So, nothing crazy, a day drive at best. But then we all moved to Florida in 1999, 2000. And that's when camp travel became a little bit more exorbitant. So we actually had to like pick which camp we wanted to go to. Mom and dad were not looking to pay for 2 plane flights to 2 different camps. I don't care who you are. That's a high price. So they said, pick the one camp you want to go to. And we all picked the same one. And it was the first one I went to, the one when I had this experience, but I had created that connection there. I felt great. And again, it worked out because we'd visit grandma for a couple of weeks. We'd go to camp for a couple of weeks. We'd visit our aunts and uncles the next week. And then we kind of had half our summer. But everyone else who I was hanging out with in school, none of them were summer campers, because Florida, not a big summer camp state, or South Florida especially. It's very hot. There's a bit more of a limitation. Not to say there's not quality programs there. There are. But it's definitely in terms of like in your roots and traditional, very much in the Northeast. All of my friends growing up then, it was just which camp you're going to, not if. So it was interesting disappearing and then coming back and kind of having these weird adventures and stories and sharing with people. It was actually really cool because as we got older and I started to work as a counselor and started working at these camps, I actually convinced some of my friends who had never been to camp to come and work at this camp, which two big bonuses there. One, I'm advocating and getting staff for an industry that across the board struggles to get competent, qualified male staff, especially in residential settings. A lot of camps struggle to fill those spots, especially looking back even at Pali. There's a huge discrepancy, and there's a lot of like, all right, how can we pack as many kids with the male counselor because we only have so many on hand, because there's just traditionally not as many who come to do the residential camp experience as opposed to more of the activities specialist positions. So I was getting people to work in camps, and it was kind of cool seeing my friends who had 0 camp experience, barely any like outdoor rec experience, and in a crash course of a 2-week training, be ready for that endeavor. And I remember one of my friends, because we had to do a hike training where you had to go out on a 3-day excursion as part of your training, because you had to be ready to take the kids out on overnight hikes. And he was completely unprepared. I gave him like a hand-me-down bag, a bunch of what I would call broken garbage gear. But I'm like, it can't be that bad. But like, a bunch of calamity of errors happened, but he ended up walking away, and he had a crash course in also going through shitty situations and circumstances, but loving it because of the camaraderie that's built, because of the team that was there, because the supervisors were in the right place at the right time to make people feel good about overcoming an obstacle and developing as an individual, as opposed to lamenting how difficult or tragic a 24 or 48 or 36-hour window of time was. I think that's a make or break point for a lot of well-established teams and leadership networks is how do you introduce misery to your team so that they understand like not every day is going to be great. This job was never told to no one ever says come work in camp, come work in outdoor ed. It's easy. There's an exhausting point. There's a point where you're going to be put at your wit's end. And if you're not able to overcome or at least manage it until you get to a point to take care of yourself the way you need to take care of yourself, then you are going to burn out. And we do see a lot of people burn out in this industry who weren't given a chance to face that wall, and supervisors and peers be there to help them get over that wall mentally or physically, so that the next time it happens, they know like, no, I can handle this. Yeah, oh, this happened. This is going to suck, but I know what to do. And I know I'm capable of it. And I know I'm growing from this as well. And I know that was a bit of a wishy-washy circular answer, but that was just another thing that I was privileged to get to see, because a lot of people, either it's everyone starts at the start of a season all together, so everyone's on the same kind of playing field, and maybe there's a few returning staff who are there to help guide, or it's people who've like, oh, I've been going to this place since I was 3 years old. I know the ropes. I love this place. You know, they could set me on fire and I'd still be like, you know, it's tradition. This is what we're supposed to do. Sort of worldview.
I just want to take a second and appreciate they could be set on fire and they'd be like, oh, this is tradition. It's fine.
Yeah. That also hints at some of the glaring issues that may exist within the industry as well, where you get the sipping the Kool-Aid a little too deep and just falling in love with the program as opposed to questioning it and asking if it should grow. But I definitely have been in that boat where I'm just like, this is what you do. This is just the job, right?
Totally. Did you go to the same camp the entire time that you were a camper and into being a counselor?
So yes, I did go to different camps in addition when I was younger. And then when we moved to Florida, we had to pick one camp to go to. So I was a camper there. I became a counselor there. I did my first introduction to OE, or outdoor education, there. However, I did, as I got out of into early college years, I did start to spend outdoor education seasons at other camps. And in fact, when I graduated after that summer, I actually went to my first California outdoor education job. And that was my first, hey, you're out of college, you need a place to live, you need work. And that was where I went. And it wasn't Pali where you and I met. I actually worked at a previous outdoor education center out there. And it's funny because it was a much smaller program, had its own ups and downs, pros and cons, but we would hear horror stories about Pali from other staff who were blowing things out of proportion. But there's this famous incident where it was during the famous snowstorms that happen traditionally up in the San Bernardino Mountains, and the bus broke down on property and the kids were stuck at Pali for an extra weekend, which at the time had never happened. I think there's been a few instances that it's occurred before, but it was one of those, the staff had all told the kids, go ahead, play in the snow, whatever, you're about to go home. So all the kids were soaking wet, and no one had clean clothes or warm clothes because they were, kind of going off like Vikings and just being ready for the weekend to start. And then it's surprise, we're all here for another 48 hours. And again, we only heard the out of context staff venting about it, but it's oh my gosh, they have to do that. Which again, you enable each other, you feed into each other's dramatizations of their stories. But that was my first introduction to the Pali, a place where I ended up working at for quite some time and enjoying my experience very much. But it's interesting what you hear about from your peers at other places, and who has it worse, who's getting paid the least, who's got the best living situation, whose schedules are the toughest. But anyways, going back to your question, that was my first foray into California outdoor education and year-round outdoor education, because before that, the outdoor education seasons that I worked at were much more weather dependent. They were based in the Northeast, so there was a lot of periods where it's schools are on winter breaks for long periods of time, roads aren't reliable, so we can't reliably extend our season into too far past November because snows are going to get blocked out. A lot of our programs can be inaccessible because the winters were just that much more rugged and the snowfall was that much greater. So it was interesting actually being no, we have work for people year round. we have a need, we have people who are interested, we have schools who want to come. So that was a really cool and segue or I should say transition into making outdoor rec work, 365, not just, oh, I've got a 3-month contract, a 2-month break, 3-month contract, month break, 3-month contract, and trying to like piece together a year. And that's when I really felt empowered and emboldened to pursue this, because I didn't go to school for anything recreation based. My degree was in history. And I remember after submitting my senior thesis, the last like project we had to do was just to write a reflective essay on our experience. And my essay was about how I don't want to be a history major. I was too deep into it though, so I'm just going to finish this degree out. But my calling is in outdoor recreation and camps, and that's where I see my future, which was the highest grade I got on the papers in that class. And that's because I was so checked out, because I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to teach kids in the classroom anymore. I want to teach kids outside. I want to teach people outside. I want to be a part of collaborative group settings, which, is that idyllic getting out of your undergrad, getting out of college and being like, I'm going to make the difference and everything's going to be great when I join the teams. Everyone loves everybody. Not to say that that was, the opposite of what happened, but you definitely feel the most empowered to make that difference once you take that first step, because you've only had like that little independence taste, not that full independent taste. So that's a little bit of where my transition came from. Again, longer answer than a question you asked, but that's kind of the zigzags I took.
No, that's super cool. It's always fascinating to me to hear like what everybody's undergrad, because like you, like I have an undergrad degree too that I like don't use. Admittedly, I had no idea that I was getting into what I was getting into until after I graduated, so I didn't get that checked out phase. But so it goes.
I think that's something that a lot of recreation individuals who don't go into recreation at the start, they find themselves going through an undergrad because that's what they kind of were told they needed to do. They picked a major that they were kind of interested in high school, which looking back is like, I'm a different person from college. I'm a different person from, every year I'm a different person. So to think that you really know what you want to do by 18, especially those who discover recreation and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this. Looking back, if I could take anything in my education back, I would have tried to go for an AA in outdoor recreation and then pivot into maybe the master's track or continue on in my higher education to really flesh out that background. But you also kind of have that sunken cost after a while. Like, well, I've already spent 4 years doing this. I have to finish this, and then I'll just figure it out from here. But I do find that a lot of the people I've spoken to in the outdoor recreation industry, it's either they started in recreation and stuck through it, or they had that aha moment when they were going through their studies of like, I don't want to be in the confines of either traditional job structure, or I'm not ready to step into that right out of college. Maybe that's for them a few more years down the line, or if ever. Because some people also take outdoor education as an opportunity to almost do higher education of themselves and discover who they are and what they want to contribute to society, and then go back to either schooling or go into the career that path that's kind of opened to them through what they've learned about themselves through outdoor education in that collaborative living environment. It's fascinating. And it's, I think, why you see a lot of happy people at times, because it's a lot of people who are like, I'm free of the 9-to-5 school life almost. I'm able to like live and feel even freer than I ever have before. But not everybody. Again, I'm not everybody.
So was the moment that you decided that you wanted to do this, or was the moment that you like found that you could do this for year round?
No, I knew I wanted to do this because, especially early on in my career, the feedback loop was so positive. And what I mean by that is I took pride, and I could tell Oracle and other people told me that I was doing good at my job, whether it was my peers who saw that enthusiasm, saw that energy, and I would get either public praise or private praise for that, supervisors who would call me out. And more importantly, the kids who would be like, you're awesome, you're my favorite counselor, especially in the residential setting where it's like, oh, I'm working with a kid who's had 8 years of counselors and they find me to be their favorite. Now, for, just so everyone knows, being a favorite counselor doesn't always mean you're a good counselor. That's a very important thing. But for me, that feedback loop of like all the things that I am trying, that I'm looking, like the programs I'm trying to create, the experiences, the memories I'm trying to create for these kids and for my peers seem to be landing, and it feels awesome when they do. And I love making other people's, at that time, summers, time outdoors, good, better, because it fed into my philosophy as an outdoor educator that, you're not trying to bring kids out into the woods and do an astronomy class so that they want to be an astronaut. You're doing it so they can appreciate astronauts, so they can appreciate the science and understand, oh, this might not be my thing. I might not love astronomy, but like I get why someone would. And I think it's neat. And if you can get more people to buy into other people's passions or want to understand those passions, then you're creating a better network, a better world, a better future. And I still do. I've bought into, if we can help instill critical thinking, positive thought, and pro-intellectualism amongst our kids, amongst our youth, and by youth, I mean also our young adults, then we can enact real change on a class level, on a society level, where people are really understanding each other's differences and not feeling like it's either you like something or you don't. And if you don't like it, you can't like people who do like it. I used to joke with people that, it's the High School Musical dilemma of like, oh, you can't like basketball and dance. But in camp and in outdoor education, you do get to expose people to that. And they learn to appreciate each other's differences instead of resent those differences or compare each other based on their differences. So that feedback loop was great. And especially on the recreation side, I loved creating awesome moments, awesome events. I remember a few friends and I created this activity called Zombie Dawn at our camp. We had no money. It was not planned. It wasn't advertised. And we created this giant zombie tag event kind of out of thin air. We made up posters and signs, very grassroots, and got people excited for it. And every year it was asked for. And so we kept building and building. And it became all the camp would show up on the field to play this big make-believe game. And that was those types of moments where you're like, I've created something and I can hand it off. Camp and outdoor education, and in my opinion, what separates fine staff and great staff is staff that not just have an impact, but they can pass that impact on to either the next generation of staff, whether it's creating a new policy, a new lesson plan, a new hike route, something that can be replicated so that other people can build on that success. Otherwise, it's just a quick flash. Like, oh, wow, that counselor was awesome. And then they left, and now camp is less awesome because that person is just gone. And that means the supervisors couldn't mimic the spirit of what that individual was bringing or what those individuals were bringing. And I'm not saying there's a clear solution to this. There's individual ownership. It's also, you can't just clone someone. That's part of the magic, is someone adding their own unique spin on it. But are you creating a robust structure that empowers and allows your teams to explore that space and create these experiences? It was one of my favorite questions to ask when I would interview staff as either a camp director or even as a senior instructor was, how do you turn a moment into an experience? Because again, especially in outdoor education, where there is a science element required, it's not just let's have fun in the woods. Some people might just focus on I have to teach this lesson instead of how do I make this lesson come up to life and make the most of the fact that we're outdoor educators. Because if all you're doing is teaching kids in the woods, well, that's just a classroom with trees. As exposed to experiencing outdoor education in the woods, that's where you've made it like, no, this is a field trip that parents should be saving up for, and districts should be funding, and staff feel great about teaching. Like, oh, you got to teach geology. I hate geology, but I love teaching geology in the woods or in this space, or it lets me work on this character for the kids, or I want to try and introduce this dynamic way of introducing a topic, or help trick the kids into having fun while learning. That's one of the big secrets, is that it's how do you trick the kids into learning sometimes when it comes to outdoor education. Because that's the other part, is you don't want it to just be, I had fun in the woods. Is that fine? Yes, that's fine. It means that kids at the very least appreciate the environment and have a touch point for when there's a question of what to do with the environment. But our goal should be to have fun and learn both the lesson you're trying to teach, because earth sciences are valuable and underrepresented in a lot of fields, or learning about oneself and their attachment to a community. I kind of got a little lost in what I was saying there, but those are some of the touch points. And going back to your question, yes, I knew I wanted to do this early on in my camp counseling career, and it's because I enjoyed all the steps. I enjoyed dealing with homesick kids. I enjoyed making new curriculum and planning things out. I enjoyed failing. I really enjoyed successes, because there's so few experiences that replicate the feeling of a group of 10, 20, 100 people thinking that what you just did for them was awesome and they appreciate it. Because a lot of what we do in the recreation field, even in the residential setting, is, well, I hope I made a difference. Because you don't always see, and especially in outdoor education, you rarely get to see what impact you had beyond the short term. Maybe you get a card from the kids because their teacher made them write it, and they say something specific, and you're like, oh, cool, they remembered the squid song. Oh, they remembered this. That's great. That means like it was sticky enough to make a difference. And so you have to hope. And being able to go through an experience where I got to see that growth in a residential camp, where I did get to see the kids year after year, helped empower me. Like, yeah, I can make a difference, and that's what I want to do. My gifts and my talents seem to let me do this best in a recreation setting. Yeah.
Do you? Oh boy.
Are we good? We're good.
Perfect. Great. I also just want to say that like part of the fun in doing this is just like all of the small things that happen. You're like, yeah, whatever. It's great. Do you have like what's a specific memory that you have of a student that you've had like that arc with, that like transformation with?
It's tough. Yeah, it's always, you have the big picture stuff, and then trying to shrink it down to the specifics. You can get really lost in am I mixing these kids up? I'm missing this experience up. Two things that come to mind were there were two batches. Batch maybe isn't the right word. It sounds like chickens. There were two classes of campers where I was their counselor at some point, and 80% of them transitioned into counselors, and I got to actually be their supervisor. And seeing them mimic and improve upon some of my curated counselor bag of tricks was really awesome. And hopefully people get the opportunity to see that, but you also need to like just let that be. I can't go up to them being like, you remember when I used to do that for you? Because then it seems self-congratulatory, like, hey, you should know I remember when I taught you that. It's me, not you. I'm the good one. You're okay. That's a lack of maturity when you have to get credit for what you're seeing done. So there is that part of it where you see that imitation is the highest form of flattery, that unintentional mimicry, where you're like, oh, they're doing the thing. This is the stuff that I was like really hoped would click to them, whether it's how you talk to your group, what do you motivate them to do? How do you pair your kids to create strong bonds for those who are struggling to become a part of the group? That was a great thing to see, like two classes of counselors about a year apart kind of come through where I could see them mimicking some of the things I distinctly remember doing with them. That wasn't like, oh, everyone does this. It was like, no, I went out of my way to plan this style of activity, or again, this form of expression. The it's a funny thing. I have two sayings that a lot of people will mimic, neither of which are necessarily unique. I like to say, in a minute but not yet, and friends of mine. It's a very common thing I put together, and it's always great when before I even start a conversation, my campers or the people who were my campers and are now my staff or are now even like in their teens, they will immediately before I start saying something, they'll be like, in a minute but not yet, friends of mine. It's that like you're listening to me and I'm having an impact with you. And yes, that little thing isn't going to be what determines their life path, but to me it's a special moment because it's like I've had an impact on you to the point where you've made a point to understand my mannerisms, my behaviors. It means that you care about what I'm doing, and what I'm doing for you. So it hopefully feeds into itself so that, all right, they know that I'm here for them. They know that I want to support them, that my goal is to make this experience awesome for them, and that they should want to make experiences awesome for others as well. And again, those are not too random. Those are random-ish sayings, but they're not like super unique. I'm not the first person to put either of those two in any sentence. But when you see that mimicry and you see that smile, because they're trying to tell you, hey, I heard this from you, I learned this from you, is a great sensation. And then there was another one that was a little bit more short. It was a shorter experience, and it was the kids doesn't necessarily demonstrate the like impact clearly as the aide who was working with those kids. So this was in an outdoor education setting. I was working with about 12 kids who were all in the same class, and there was one kid who was had special needs and had an aide with them at times. And as we all went through these 3 days together, this other kid who happened to have special needs also had some other family dynamics that made them the other within their group, but also oblivious to that status. It was awesome to see his group be so supportive towards him, and for some of the actions that I tried to guide them through be so impactful at creating a positive and inclusive environment. And again, the kids who were in that group were already stellar. It wasn't like I was dealing with a bullying situation or anything like that. However, after the fact, it was the aide that came up to me and went like, hey, just so you know, that was probably the best and closest these kids have all come to being such a strong and supportive group for each other, that it wasn't just, oh, we're all putting all of our efforts towards helping one kid fit in. It's we're all seeing growth and connection within each other. So that was weird. That was not, I shouldn't say weird. That was an interesting one because there was an actual other third-party adult who had spent the school year with these kids who could reaffirm, hey, just so you know, like this was great what you did for these kids. I've already seen the growth in them in these few days they've been with you. And a lot of counselors do have that experience, but they don't necessarily get that actual adult presence who can say, just so you know, this was awesome. You did great. So that was another one where it was like, it felt awesome because the efforts were appreciated, and not just appreciated, but created a more positive impact. Again, it's not just for the attaboy. It's not just for the, you're awesome. That was so cool. It's like, yeah, cool is cool, but I want this to be something they can take with them. A lot of the opportunities missed is when us as recreation professionals fail to recognize that we are fundamental in creating a unique scaffolding for these kids to attach life lessons and memories to. We're in a unique environment. We fill a unique space of adult peer mentor. We're not related to them. We're not their teacher. We're not their parents. We aren't required to like the kids that we work with, that we can just smile at them, but we don't have to like these kids. And so to put yourself in a scenario where the kids do recognize you care for them, they do recognize the effort you're putting into them, you do show them what life can be, what they're capable of. Again, it goes back to that scaffolding metaphor of this is a whole new branch on their development that really can't be recreated anywhere else. That's why I'm a strong supporter of outdoor education and push for schools and parents to support it, because there is no environment quite like outdoor education or in camps for kids to develop a space that is purposely designed to have hardship, manageable hardships, working with adult peers and other peers, learning how to advocate for yourself, learning the values that you can bring to a group and you seek from others. None of that is done in the speed and with the joy of recreational outdoor settings. Sports get close, but they become very close-minded, almost clustered of like, this is the one thing we care about and that's what we're going to attach to. And that's fine. But in outdoor recreation, it's no, you got 10 kids in a cabin, all different. None of them maybe chose to be in the same cabin with each other. So they have nothing in common besides their height. And you're just this dude who they're told they should listen to, but they also figure out they outnumber you if you're not careful. And you have to navigate that with them. In a school, teachers can't jeopardize their authority enough that a recreational group can, because like, hey, I'm with you for 2 weeks. I need you to listen to me, sure. But like ultimately, we can have more fun because I don't need to wrangle you in for a year and get you through a standardized testing circuit. So we get that freedom to be an authority figure that is able to lighten up a little and show them another version of healthy adult peer relationships. And that's something that's pretty big right now. It should have been big longer, but keeping kids safe and understanding what is a healthy adult peer relationship, what's an unhealthy peer adult and peer relationship, and how to advocate for their needs and how to recognize those red flags of like, oh, this friend is not good for me, or this adult isn't treating me with the respect I do deserve. That I'm not just a kid, I'm a person. We're going down a whole different road there, but those are all the pieces. Those are all the tent poles that really hoist outdoor education and recreation to a different echelon of collaborative group experiences. More so than just I spend an hour of team building or I have a rec basketball league that I hang out with. All have merit, all have opportunities for growth. None of them even get close to what you can achieve in a nature-based group setting.
Do you think that setting has to be nature-based?
I know it doesn't, but I do think it suffers from not being based in a natural setting. And what I mean by that is, one, there's a primal connection we have to the earth. And there's a level of anxiety that comes from being out in the open, out in the woods. And being exposed to that allows you to learn how to overcome, how to embrace, and to understand anxiety within yourself a little more. Not to say that it cures anxiety, not at all. However, anxiety is a tool that if we don't get exposure to and don't learn how to manage, it can overwhelm and take over our lives. And by introducing this safe anxiety of, I'm away from home, I'm in the woods, I'm in the other, yet I'm okay, yet my needs are being met. Yet if I make it through this, I realize that wasn't as bad as I thought. Getting exposed to thoughts of homesickness, discomfort. I don't know any outdoor education facility or really any camp that has a mattress that people are so excited to sleep on outside of maybe a long day. So you learn to be like, I was uncomfortable, but like I didn't die. That was a bummer, but like I'm fine. And the majority of my day was awesome. I got to go down a zip line. I got to do archery. I got to see a bobcat. Like you start to see the effort gains a better reward. And when you're surrounded by a non-natural setting, it's adding another layer of separation. It's the allegory of the cave. It's are you seeing the shadow or are you seeing the real piece? Like what are you connecting with in terms of your goal? And that depends as well. That's the other part of it is if you're goal as an outdoor recreation center or facility is to just introduce science and teach science, there's less buy-in, I think, when you don't have a natural setting, but I think the difference is less. But if your goal is to really build collaborative recreational and residential style, like multi-day programs, you do miss something by not removing the individuals from their comfort, their center of comfort, and push them into that growth zone. I think the natural environment really helps with that. And kind of circling back to something we talked about earlier is if kids don't have a touch point, I say kids, really anyone in their developmental cycle, doesn't get a positive touch point within nature, they're less likely to care when that environment is in question. If its usage is being debated, not necessarily as dramatic as we're going to raise that forest, but like, whoa, what do I care about a forest that I never went to, that I have no connection to, and it's just a bunch of trees. There's more trees out there in other spots, as opposed to like, no, I know that I've had good experiences in forests, in caves, by beaches, by X, Y, and Z. So I am going to question why we need to use these resources in this way. Again, maybe you're not going to march, maybe you're not going to protest, but you're going to question the why. And by having more people question, we have a more, hopefully, a society and population that's trying to be more informed and trying to maybe become better impacts on those decisions. So I would say, and I'm biased because I spent most of my time in recreational and outdoors based recreation centers, and they were always superior. Especially, I mean, I did do like the city day camps where you still went outside, but it was just a field. And for some kids, that's a big step. So that's the other part where the outdoors can be maybe too intimidating. Is I remember we would work with kids who had grown up so much of their lives in the city that when they did get a school field trip to our camp property, they would like look at goats and go like, those are huge rabbits, and just like not. And that's a direct quote from a kid who's like, damn, those are some huge rabbits. And it was great. Now, whether they were joking or not, it was a reminder though, that most of us who are in outdoor recreation, we've already bought in that nature's cool. And we probably have had some exposure in our lives to nature, whether intentionally by our families or self-sought. So we take it for granted that a tree isn't necessarily crazy to see so many trees in one place, or to see a natural flowing pond. We're like, yeah, that's nature. You kind of almost become numb to it. You almost start seeking just the grander and grander versions of nature. It's like, oh, this mountain's only 2,000 feet, whatever. I only care if it's 10,000 up. It's like, no, kids kind of ground us a little bit and go like, oh, no, all nature has significance. And I think that's something that can get lost when you look at outdoor education and recreation and you start overly jobifying it in your mind and you start to resent it almost. And some people get to that point, and that's where you also start to devalue the natural setting you're in. So if possible, the natural setting definitely enhances the experience, in my opinion. Some kids would complain as well. They'd be like, but it means we're getting rained on all the time. That was a common thing at Pali and other outdoor education centers that you deal with, because you only have so many indoor spaces. So when it's like raining or the weather's bad, you have to make do. And some people will then be like, oh, the nature sucks because we're getting wet and it's miserable. But that in itself is an opportunity for growth. And great counselors will see that. And it's not easy because you also are cold and tired. Unless you've got great gear and everything's worked out for you, awesome. But that's the other part of the job that differentiates the counselors or instructors who are getting by and just kind of working towards the weekend, and those who are like, no, I'm here for this experience of giving kids exposure to something they're not ready for and helping them overcome it. And again, same thing as everything else. They might be miserable, and you might think that you've just ruined their lives because you turned on the weather somehow. But it is, hopefully, you have to hope that months, years down the line, they look back to that memory with fondness and joy. And I'll say most people who I've interacted with who've had those terrible days, those awful experiences, everything went wrong. And then you do get maybe the rare opportunity to talk with that group or touch or hear from that group again. And they're like, those kids are like, my favorite part of our trip was when John fell out of his canoe. And then John is also like, that was my favorite part, was falling out of the canoe and, getting really cold and being miserable and crying. And you're like, don't you remember that, like, you were sad for like 4 hours and like refused my help and all this? Like, well, I don't know. It was my favorite part because it was a memory. It was an immovable piece of their childhood that you got to be a part of developing. That's huge. That's, if you don't see how important and impactful that is, then you might be getting into the outdoor recreation, outdoor education field for more selfish or misaligned reasons. That's not to say you shouldn't do it necessarily, but you might be more interested in just working outside, and this is the best option to do that, which you run into in this career. You run into those people who want to do everything but work with the kids. And it would be great. And hopefully in the future, there's a bigger market for adult outdoor recreation, but that tends to lead into more retreats and more taking business people and putting them on a zip line. And that's not really outdoor education. That's just a fun day at the park, which has value. But that is something that you see a lot of people feel funneled into having to work with kids to be in outdoor education versus getting into outdoor education to work with kids, to work with youth, to work with teens or anything of that ilk. And you see those people, they usually either burn out or you see them hop around from facility to facility because they just haven't found the one that quite locks in what they want to do. Excuse me. Or you get those people who they want a promotion just because it means they might not have to work with the kids as much. And it's terrible. It's not terrible. It's telling, because if you don't want to be there for the kids and these kids are there to have an experience with you, it means both groups struggle. Both groups fail. Sorry, that's just the cough. I'm not emotional about what I'm saying necessarily, because these kids need you to care about them. And if you're just trying to get through your curriculum and you just compartmentalize your day like that, you're just doing cookie cutter experiences for these kids. And this might be their one opportunity to work with someone in an outdoor setting. And if you don't try to make it amazing, why would that school, that church, that business see the need to bring their kids back? If you're kind of making it seem like anyone could do this, if it's just read this curriculum, go through these bullet points, move on. To me, it's, why are you wasting your time? Now, again, some people have to discover this. Some people have to go through the motions and maybe be exposed to another peer who helps show them the importance they have. A lot of people get into any career with low self-worth and don't think they can have that impact on kids. And so they don't try and push it that way, or they have an early experience that doesn't go well. And so they kind of hold back. It's interesting. And it feeds into a very, I would say, outdoor rec and outdoor education unique phenomenon where you'll have staff who during like staff training are really quiet on their own, not really engaging in the college light experiences, if you will, of camaraderie and beginning to meet the new staff you're going to be working with and being really personable with them. And I've been in the room with supervisors and as a supervisor where you talk about those staff being like, oh, I'm worried that, John's going to make it through training. He really doesn't seem to be making any connections. Then the kids show up and it's game time. And what do you know? John's crushing it because this is what he came here for. He came here to work with these kids in this setting and make sure their experience was awesome. And meanwhile, and this is not always the case, but the individuals who were maybe more focused on the social dynamics of their job, they burn out faster because they start to value their time with their peers more than their opportunity with their campers or their groups that they are with. And that can be a slippery slope for some. And some people dip, but come back up. Some people dip, crash, and burn. And it's wow, this person was the coolest and greatest counselor during training. And now they're useless and they're complaining all the time. And what are we supposed to do with this person? But everyone likes them. Yeah, but the teachers complain about them and they complain about the job more than anyone else. In a not, hey, let's grow the program way, but in more of just a, I don't want to work, the job's too hard sort of way. That's my biased soapbox, but it is something that I do think is unique in the outdoor education setting, where you have a social element to most of the job, for the most case, especially residential based ones or group living based ones, that can sometimes blind people or fog the reason they're doing this. Again, did you show up here because you wanted to work in California, not have to worry about housing, and hang out with like-minded individuals? Cool. That you can still do this job then, but it might be really hard for you to do the job, and you might get burnt out quickly, because most of the job is actually, do you want to work with kids? Do you want to enrich kids' lives? Do you understand that that takes a lot to do? I learned early on, you can't just be the loud guy to enrich kids' lives. That's the easy way. I was a loud guy. I still am a loud guy, but that's not all you can rely on. That can be your hook. That can be your thing, but you got to also pair that with a genuine desire to learn more about how to develop youth, how to develop yourself, and how to make the most out of this experience. And to be clear, I had plenty of days that I did not want to work the job I had. I had plenty of days, plenty of weeks where I was like, I don't want to work with kids ever again. I had them. Everyone does. Anyone who says they don't is lying to you, or might have early onset dementia. But that was too offensive. So that's for some. Working with kids is difficult and demanding and hard, and you will get kids who suck. All right, you get them. You get a group of them, 10 kids who are all entitled, lame, lazy, don't care about anything you're trying, and everything you're doing is not what they want. And you have to put up with it. And it beats you down, because when you still try and put your effort in, you're still trying your best. Sometimes it's just, you're not clicking with it, or I used to sing this little song to people where it's just, I guess your best wasn't good enough, so why'd you even try? It's the Pokemon theme. But you hit those walls, but it's what you do to get over that wall. And even if you don't get over it, you just get around it. It's like, all right, this wall's too big for today, but I made it through it. Maybe I cheated a little, but now I get to revisit this wall later and think back on it. That is sometimes what is really nice about the recreation field, whether it's residential or just day programs. There is a finite amount of time you have to put up with anything. The worst group of campers, the most annoying adult group, the loudest, obnoxious teacher, they have an end date. And believe it or not, you can outlast them. Don't let them drain you of what you love about what you do. And reflect on, well, if that person can have that much control over what I love about this, am I just telling myself that I love this job? Am I just, well, everyone says I have to do it for the kids, but am I actually just more interested in rock climbing with my buds? Okay, well, if that's true, dig into that, reflect on that. And not saying like, get out while you still can. No, you still have the capacity to be an amazing outdoor recreation leader, outdoor educator, but it does hopefully help you maybe limit or narrow down and really boil down, what are you trying to get out of your life through this? Sometimes it leads other people to be like, outdoor education is not what I'm into. I really want to be an outdoor rec leader and like be a trip guide, do more, hey, everyone here is here because they want to be ruggedly outdoors. Or maybe you learn, I want to be a manager. I like the logistics side of this, or I love the team building side. I want to just do that. Okay, great. And I wish I could say, then start your own company, but it is a tough industry to break into. It's a tough industry to survive in. And so some people get trapped into, well, this place is putting food on the table, it's got housing. I'm just going to keep doing this, even if I resent it, even if I don't want to do it. And honestly, a lot of job places are desperate enough for staff that they're willing to just put up with you and kind of work out the law of averages of like, all right, well, this staff member sucks, but they're not breaking the rules. They're just super mid, but we're not getting complaints. So that's fine. And I know that that was more rambly than anything, but I do think some people are either too afraid or have too, or maybe they've made social connections they care a lot about and they're not willing to step away from. But to do that actual reflection when you face that adversity and be like, well, why am I here? And that's what helped me in my experiences. Well, I'm here because I want to make the world a better place through working with youth in recreational settings. And although this experience maybe was hard, was it in line with that goal? Yeah. Was it shitty kids? Yeah. But that still means that I'm trying to work with the shitty kids and the great kids to make the world a better place through their experience in recreation. And I would love to know if those kids were a little less shitty after they worked with me, maybe. I don't know. And again, that it's just, I'm swearing inappropriately. Kids will come as they are. And you need to accept that you're meeting them at a stage in their development. If you give up on them, then you're just like every other adult who's given up on them or has enabled them to be less than they're capable of. And that's something that is important to me to help try and guide youth to, and to try now in more of the positions I've held in the modern world of as camp directors and such, is how to help other staff discover what they're capable of and figure out how to buy into the experience as well. Because that is something that I know in my personal experience. I was a great counselor, I've been told, and I received promotions for it. I received responsibility for it. But being a great counselor, being a great educator, being a great instructor does not mean you're necessarily ready to be a great middle management or management figure. But it's an industry that has so few and such narrow paths for advancement that you can't pass them up when they come up. You can't go, I don't know if I'm ready for this. It's more of, I have to take this on because the next position won't open until someone quits or dies. And that's kind of the trap of camp, especially. The whole joke is like, oh, the camp director position, the last guy who had it for 50 years, then he retired. The guy before him had it for 30 years and then died. So we just got a new director. If I'm 30, oh, then that job won't open up until I'm 80. So I got to look elsewhere. I got to find other opportunities for development. It's the struggle a lot of recreational centers deal with is how do I retain my amazing staff member who isn't quite ready to be a management member, or I just don't have the budget to create a new position for them, or there isn't enough positions to go around. And it sucks. And I've had to have conversations with staff before where I've had to tell them, like, this is where you're at. This is where you can be. And if you want more, you're probably going to have to move on. And not like a get out of here, but it's a bit of a, I'm not going to trap you here and use your love for this facility against you. You clearly have more to grow, more to give, and you've given as much as you can here. And hopefully in the future, we can try and bring you back in, but you got to help those people create those connections and network where they can, because this field, although it's across the whole country, is narrow and difficult. And there is a lot of that, well, this person's been here for 10 years, so they're ahead of you in line, even if on paper you're a better staff member than they are. So that's another element of, like, you got to get your foot in the door some places and spend your time establishing yourself there for maybe the chance a position opens up. And I get to all that because, going back to my own experience, I was definitely promoted in a way that did not actually grow my management skills. And it just let me be a great counselor, but not as much. And it, like, allowed me to develop poor works habits that took me a while to grow and recover from. And you work with other peers who are in the same boat too, who were like great at the job they had, but not necessarily great at the job they got. But the people either were going to lose them because you knew that person was looking for more responsibility. And sometimes especially I find this in the camp and outdoor education world, when it's the season, everyone gets so busy that your management doesn't get enough time to coach the middle management. And they have to kind of rely on the like, well, you know the job, you were so good at it, so you'll know what to do when a counselor comes to you with this question, or you'll naturally want to take on this responsibility, as opposed to like, well, no, I know what to do in the cabin, but now that I'm in the office, there's some things I wasn't aware of, because in the cabin it was my own world and I could do what I did within that space. And now I have more unfamiliar territories to try and work through, and I can't just wing it like I could or rely on the skills that made me a great counselor, because those aren't what make you a great manager, especially of peers, especially in a more administrative focus. So that's not to dissuade anyone from pursuing and taking promotions. Take them when you can get them. That's more of a, for anyone who's trying to create or groom their middle management team and finesse them into the next wave of managers and be able to improve your program, you do need to be aware, are you hiring someone who's the best for the job, or just the person who's the best at their current job? And sometimes you do promote that person who is best for the job, and then that other person, that golden unicorn who is so good at their job, is like, well, I feel overlooked, I'm going to move on. And you have to be like, yeah, that's fair. You have to stand by your guns, but you have to do what's right to grow your program. And sometimes that means hurting people's feelings. And there's a lot of people in the camp world, in the outdoor recreation world, who blur that line between I'm your supervisor and I'm your friend, whether because they started in the same crop of staff, or they've were kind of like close to each other or knew each other in some way, or just became friends because they really connected during the shared experience everyone had. You become blind to the shortcomings of each other, or you would do anything not to lose that individual because of your personal connection to them. Again, this is not across the board, but it is something that is a lot easier to occur in a more holistic and socially structured setting that camp and outdoor education historically trend towards. The end.
I think that you hit on a lot of things that I also have can say that I've seen as well. For one, this isn't really a quick question, I'm sure, for you, but what do you think if you didn't do this camp thing? Where do you think, the real question I'm asking is what do you think has been the biggest impact that the outdoor industry has had on you, whether it's been summer camps or outdoor ed, or even recreation, just the whole broader outdoor industry of working outside?
Yeah. One, and it's maybe oddly not a common one, is attention to my health. A lot of people get into outdoor rec and they're already healthy individuals, nature bound, outgoing in that way. When I started camp, I was 300 plus pounds, and not in a Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of way. And it was a struggle, because there would be parts of my job that I would be limited from, because I would either get too exhausted or be physically incapable of meeting the needs of my group. And so wanting to do this job made me reflect on the importance of healthy living and all the elements that go into healthy living, physically, mentally, socially, and emotionally. So having positive experiences and wanting to succeed, wanting to do my job well, sent me down a path of being much more aware and much more intentional with my own health and well-being, and helping guide the health and well-being of others. So although that's not as grandiose as some of the other topics we've been talking about, that's one of the realest things of my elements of my life that fundamentally changed once I started to really expose myself to outdoor recreation and education, was the importance of health, and that you can feel powerless, but you can reclaim that power. And on the other side of it, the ability to love oneself and to appreciate one's stories and successes. I was like many of those staff you see that are so energetic and so happy and so smiley. I struggle with depression. I always thought I was doing a bad job, to the point where sometimes I sought that validation of others being like, "Oh, Snacks, you're so blah." And I'm like, "Okay, so I'm not a piece of shit." Which that maybe that's too real, but that's something that working with people who helped me understand more of my mental health battles and my own health journey was pivotal. And then the other part that it had a big part, the other impact it had on me was on the as a child end of things. How meaningful the support and attention my counselors gave me during periods of my life where they didn't know the struggles I was going through physically, mentally, or emotionally at home or in the real world. All they knew was that I was this kid on their roster. And although not, I had my fair share of bad counselors, but every counselor still made me feel seen, still made me feel like I deserved love, that I should love myself, and that there are other people who do care about me, who don't legally have to. That no one legally has to like anybody, but it's not. They aren't my parents who like traditionally. Your parents love your kids. Not everyone, and that's a very important thing to be aware of when you're working with kids. That you might be the only positive peer influence they've ever been exposed to, but that was so important in my development. Is those counselors who made me feel seen and not judged. They saw me for who I was in that moment. They didn't know about my baggage. They didn't care about my baggage. They treated me just like another kid, and they treated me well, I should say. And, some of those counselors probably don't remember me as their camper, but I remember them. And that is what would motivate me and help me in my interactions with individuals to the best of my ability, is to try and have a positive impact. Because if I'm still remembering a counselor from 29 years ago, someone might remember my act of kindness 40 years from now. And that's a good thought. That's a good feeling. And if we can try and fill people's experiences with that, hopefully we create a more empathetic world and a society that values, ran out of words on that, values creating a space where others can feel that love and can go on their own journeys and not feel judged for the journey that they decide to go on. Yeah. So those, two big things: my health, both physically, mentally, socially, and emotionally, and as a kid being exposed to the power that a positive adult role model can have are two of the biggest impacts that I can still reflect on and still unpack to this day.
That is really incredible. Are you still? I have like two more things that I'd like to ask if you're still good on time.
Yeah, we're still doing good on time, I think.
Okay. I mean, we're at 3:15. I need to leave here at 3:30.
Yeah. I'll keep this quick. I tried to keep that last question a little quicker for you.
That's great.
Yeah.
What do you think the outdoor industry needs? Like the outdoor recreation, whether it's specifically outdoor ed or whether it's, that camp thing. What do you think that it needs?
On the scary socialist element, I would love for all states to mandate outdoor recreation field trips for fourth or fifth graders. That's something that California really pushed, and it really helped that industry grow and create exposure and create a market, because exposure is the biggest thing. And for better or worse, not a lot of outdoor educators are the best marketing teams. They're not not to be rude to anybody, they're not the scummy marketing teams that are like trying to manipulate people into buying your product. There's a little bit more of a wholesome element to it. Not to say it's absent, but that is something that I think is important, is exposure, because so many times there's countless stories in my experience, both in outdoor recreation and camp, where you hear the parents were all like, I just wish there was a place for my kid to get away from technology and spend time with friends. Like, it's called camp. It's been around for hundreds of years. And people are like, oh my gosh, did you know there was a place that's cell phone free? It's like, what do you mean? Yeah, it's always been here. So creating exposure and accessibility. So when I say state mandated, I think government dollars should go towards exposing kids to outdoor settings. I don't see the counter argument of why it's irrelevant for a child to spend meaningful time outdoors. And I mean, in a perfect world, it would be subsidized and receive education dollars so that we could have teacher salaries, which I know sounds like, well, who wants a teacher salary? Outdoor educators would love to get at least a teacher salary. Because summer camp counselors would even. And I'm not saying that just pour money into it, but at the end of the day, it is the most valuable resource for any program to use to help recruit more staff, retain better staff, train better staff, provide better facilities, and a better enriching experience for kids. So I'd love for there to be a stronger push and mandate for states, or really, or even on the federal level, to get kids outdoors at some point in their early education career, and again in their later education career. I'd love for there to be a cycle where, like, yeah, every elementary school student does a 3-day trip and every high school student does a 3-day trip. Not saying that all school kids stay together, but I think there's an important element of like exposing at a young age, exposing before you go into your big formative adult years of college and beyond, if that's the path you choose. So I would love to see that. And I think that would be huge. The other part would be, yeah, being more strategic and aggressive in marketing and staffing. There's so many people who don't realize that outdoor education could be a great path for them or even a great stepping stone for them. And it's hard to get exposed to that if you're not already interested in it. Again, I mentioned this earlier. There's a lot of people who are in outdoor education who are never going to not be in outdoor education, if that makes sense. Like they've known they want to work outside. So they found those groups, they found that like culture, they found that tribe. It's how do you get those people who maybe would never have considered it? And how do you give them that moment? How do you hook them in to try it out and discover that, oh, this is an industry that I didn't know existed, and I think I could have a positive impact on?
That is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. And just for the last question, if that should be relatively easy and simple, is do you have any trips planned and where are you going?
So there's a few spots my wife and I are looking at doing trips. Right now we have 2 dogs. So there's a lot of state parks where we're at. So I live right now in Roanoke, Virginia, which is Western Virginia. So we are looking to go to the Washington Jefferson National State Park, hopefully after this winter season. So for Virginia, that means more of like mid-March, early April, and before the big summer season really kicks off. And then longer down the line, we're hoping to plan a bigger trip to Maine. And then there's another one that's much further down the line. We're trying to get a summer Alaskan trip, but that's years away. That's something we're, saving up for, planning out for. Obviously we can't bring the dogs on that one. So it's like, do we wait till there's no dogs, yada, yada. But Alaska's like the bucket list big trip. But right now it's state parks. And I think a lot of people write off their state parks, mainly those who aren't like in California, who are like surrounded by the greatest parks in North America and stuff like that. But yeah, because we're surrounded by like 7 of them and we've only been to 2. So that's one. And then looking to do a small chunk of the AT that's very near us. Near Roanoke, there's McAfee Point, which is like the most photographed part of the AT. So there's a very like commercial chunk of the AT. So it'd be nice to go a little bit beyond that and just kind of explore that space a little bit more. Not saying it's a never thing, but it is one of my things of like a bucket list item that probably won't get to materialize is hiking half the AT, if not the whole AT at some point. But the life direction I'm on, that I'm happy with, by the way, is that might not be a possibility until the very near or the very far future, which hopefully if the AT is still there, doesn't mean you can't still hike it. People do what they do.
So there's your plug, everybody, for checking out your state parks.
They're beautiful, they're amazing, and they're much more dog friendly than national parks.
Well, Snacks, thanks for being on. Totally appreciate it.
That was my pleasure, Scott.
And until next time, I hope everyone gets a chance to do the thing.
Yeah, everyone do your thing.